Welcome to another episode of Photo Enthusiastic. I'm your host, Jim Fair. I exchanged my Nikkor 50mm MC lens at 8-in camera for the 105mm. Nothing wrong with the 50. I just decided I wanted to step up to the S line, which has a little more magic, I believe, in terms of its optics, and it's a little more built like a tank. But it also has a longer working distance, much of which is eaten up by the giant hood that you put on your 105. But that's fine. And, if you're concerned about 105 and how does it fare against the older ones, well, I can tell you it's a lot sharper. And that sharpness pretty much extends to wide open. And if you want more details, I recommend you look at Hudson Henry's video where he compares all of the 105s, which is a very nice video. I'll put a link up above here. So that's kind of the news and the weather, so to speak. I do think the 50 has a useful place. For one thing, it's compatible with Nikon's ES2 slide attachment thing. So you can put this little thing in front of your 50mm and digitize an old slide with it, right? You can't do that with the 105. It's not compatible because it has to be focusing at that shorter distance of, I think it's like 16 centimeters. And the 50mm does. The 105's working distance is a little longer. I don't recall exactly how much longer, but it's longer. I have a few shots I've taken with the 50, both macro and non-macro, like street photography, that I'll put up here, and a couple of shots so far with the 105. Nothing award-winning, but if you have any comments on my composition or technique, please let me know. I always like constructive feedback. I'm always trying to improve my photography. I'm an enthusiast, just like most of you watching. So, self-improvement is the goal, especially photographic improvement, right? To that end, there's another channel that I like, The Photographic Eye. It's a relatively new channel. There he goes. How's it? The Photographic Eye is a very nice channel with Alex Kilby, and basically talks about the joy of photography, basically, and how you can develop yourself as a photographer. And he says it's not about the gear. Some of us are gearheads, but it's not about the gear, obviously. So that's a nice channel if you want to have a look at it. It's called The Photographic Eye with Alex Kilby. Yeah. And I'll put a link up in the description to one of his videos. He's an interesting fellow to watch. What else is interesting? Oh, I found another interesting channel, Joel Grimes Photography. He has some details on, shooting very detailed photography in the highest bit depth possible, and editing, 16-bit versus 8-bit files, and how this can offer you a lot more gradations in tone. So that's a very interesting fellow to look at as well. And another favorite channel of mine while I'm at it is Matt Irwin, of course, of Melbourne, Australia. And he covers a lot of Nikon issues. And, I also have to comment on a note from the Angry Photographer. He's once again come out and said very negative things about Nikon. He thinks Nikon, he equates their company to that of a corpse that is being reanimated by the people running the company. And he compares Nikon to the dead guy in that movie. What is that movie with the dead guy underwater and stuff? Weekend at Bernie's. That's an old 80s film, I think it was. So, and he's basing this basically on the fact that Nikon's moved all of their production out of Japan, and that the Japanese are very proud of their production in Japan, blah, blah, blah. And essentially moving production out of Japan means Nikon is dead. I don't think it means Nikon is dead. Yeah, they've had to lower their costs and, you know, cut certain areas, but I think they're profitable again. And, you know, I think this talk of them being dead is patently ridiculous. I don't believe it for a second. And, you know, if you want to be really negative about these things, fine, but keep in mind that you're perpetuating what you're selling. You know, if people believe it, if enough people don't believe it, they won't buy Nikon. And Nikon may in fact fail because a bunch of folks on social media said bad things about them. Now, I don't think that's necessarily going to happen, and I certainly don't think Nikon is failing. Far from it. And I don't really think they're a reanimated corpse either. That's just ridiculous. So that's my opinion on that. And, you know, I know he's an expert on optics, and he's got a very good recommendation on lenses, and he's a big fan of Fujifilm. Another thing he did was compare the ZFC, the new ZFC, to the XT4 and the XT3. It's like, no, those cameras cost, you know, $500 or more than the ZFC. If you want to compare a Fujifilm to the ZFC, compare the XT30. That's a fair comparison. No IBIS. So you got 20.9 megapixels on the Nikon, 26 on the Fuji. Very, very similar specs otherwise. And yeah, Fuji does come out a little bit ahead, but you're missing a point here, Ken, and the point is that it's Nikon, okay? It can take Nikon glass. So, and all of the Nikon fans who want a retro body, well, now's their chance. Yeah, if you just want any old retro body, it doesn't have to be a Nikon, fine, go out and buy a Fuji if that's what turns your crank. But, you know, if you got a pile of Nikon lenses lying around and you want to put them to use, it would sure be nice to have a Nikon with a retro feel, would it not? So, you know, and if you don't need the retro part, just get a Z50. Nothing wrong with that camera. It's basically a D500 mirrorless, right? So you'll probably get annoyed with me for saying that. D500 mirrorless? How can you compare this to the beloved D500? Well, it's not difficult. They're using the same sensor, basically. Very similar specs. Yeah, one's a DSLR, one's a mirrorless. Big deal. You know, the Z50 actually 11 frames per second. So beat that on a DSLR. I don't think you can. Not in that price range anyway. So yeah, you can see I got a little bit wired up there. Anyway, I'll put some pictures up of the taken with the 50 and the 105, and let me know what you think. Feel free to tear my pictures apart, but you know, be gentle. Okay, that's all I have to say today. Thank you for watching, and fade out.